Good morning, folks. This is more of a sales update and less of an analysis because I only got like 30 minutes to do this right now. If you want to hear all about my opinions about the sales and the hype dwindling downwards on the Switch 2, you can watch any of my other videos prior to this one. Plus, I had the big one yesterday. Anyway, so the Switch 2 numbers for Japan over the previous week have just come in, and it is by far the worst performing week of the Switch 2. Like, we're talking a huge nosedive. This is completely objective. 35,000 units sold in a single week for the Switch 2 this far after launch. Nobody predicted it would be this low right now, and that's just an objective bit of news. Like, this is not me adding any kind of commentary to it. This is me just saying that the Switch 2 has sold its significantly worst performing week, and it is like really low. Now, it could be a supply issue. It could be that they burnt through everything during the past 2 weeks while it was a holiday in Japan. I haven't been shy about this. I actually think that the Switch 2 is fairly available in Japan to the point where if you actually do want one, you can get one. It just takes a little bit more effort, similar to trying to grab a Switch 2 in the stateside in June. But as it goes, this is just my assumption based off of the type of patterns that I'm seeing and based off of some of the conversations that I'm following online. If I give Nintendo the benefit of the doubt and we say that it actually is a supply issue, that could potentially mean that they had pushed out as many units as they did over the course of the past 2 weeks because of the holiday over there in Japan. And this is the following week where they didn't have as much stock to push. And it could also mean that they were potentially trying to save more units specifically for this week because these numbers are for last week, right? And since Kirby and the Forgotten Land DLC, whatever it's called, Switch 2 edition, since that comes out this week, when the next week's numbers come, that'll show that more Switch 2 units were potentially sold, and that could be the bump up they're looking for. Similar to what they did way back when Bonanza came out. So we very likely could be looking at like it dropped massively this week and then suddenly it just increases a lot last week, because that's exactly what happened prior to Bonanza. I'm not of the opinion that that's going to happen, but I'm not going to rule it out. I think this is just following the regular market trends. A lot of the people that wanted the Switch 2 have gotten the Switch 2, and it's not a console that is gaining hype, it's a console that is losing hype. They're getting so much bad press because of game key cards, they're getting so much bad press because of how poorly the third-party titles play. And obviously in the tighter circles, we're talking about bans, we're talking about Pal World, there's all this other stuff that's going on. And then the most important thing is that the only games that they're offering are Switch 1 games, so people are less incentivized to go out and buy a Switch 2. And a few weeks ago, I said that the Switch 1 sales numbers were very close to the Switch 2. Now they're even closer. You're looking at 17,000 Switch 1s sold last week, and the Switch 2 is at 35,000. And I keep saying it, but we're getting closer and closer to that week where the last gen console outsells the Switch 2. And every time I make that statement, the comment section gets filled up. Oh, there's zero chance that the Switch 1 is going to outsell the Switch 2. Yeah, we'll see. That gap is getting really close. The bottom line is, when people look at Nintendo, they view it as a budget company because they provide budget quality. That's not to say that the games aren't fun, and that's not to say that the games are not timeless, and that's not to say that you could lose yourself in the games for hours upon end. But the reality is, the price matters, and it's always mattered for Nintendo. And really, one of the best benefits that the Switch 2 has in Japan right now is that the PS5 is just so much absurdly higher than it. But at the same time, the Switch 1 is just so much cheaper. And if you're gonna be playing Switch 1 games anyway, in addition to underperforming and stuttering third-party titles, why would you pay Switch 2 money for the Switch 1 experience? The bottom line is there, and that bottom line is how much is somebody willing to take out of their wallet to pay for a console. And at the end of the day, if I hold a Switch 1 and a Switch 2 in front of somebody and put Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on one of them and Mario Kart World on the other one, and I tell them, hey, this one is whatever, $500 and this one is $300, and those are obviously US numbers, those aren't the prices in yen. When you're over there, it's different. That average customer is going to look at them and be like, why would I pay extra? It's the same thing, give me that one. And it's showing. These are massive drops off in sale, these are nosedives. It still hasn't flatlined. I'm still trying to find where that base is going to be, where the Switch 2 just does a huge jump back forward and it like hops around a little bit and it just levels off. But right now, since launch until this point, it just like drops down, slightly bounces back up, drops down, slightly bounces back up, but it's going downwards like very consistently. With the amount of hype that's generated in Japan, with the amount of popularity that it's had, every few weeks people are estimating what that baseline is going to be, and every few weeks that number has dropped downwards. Now, to be clear, if this thing just levels off and it continues to sell 35,000 units a week, or if it like bounces back up and it's hitting 50 to 60,000 a week, that's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. That's a good baseline. But the thing is, right now, I don't know where that baseline is, and I don't think anybody knows where that baseline is going to be. Like, the Switch 2 has already been surpassed by the Game Boy Advance as far as launch lineup sales. The PS2 is not that far off behind it, and if the sales numbers don't pick up within a couple weeks, it's gonna be the third fastest selling console in Japan. And at that point, they can still talk about how it's outperforming the Switch 1, even though the Switch 1 was gaining momentum and the Switch 2 is losing momentum. To give you an idea, this same alignment with the Nintendo Switch 1 came out. That's week 12 after launch. It sold 27,000 units. The Switch 2 sold 35,000 units. And this was very much during the time where people's heads were slowly turning back towards Nintendo after the failure that was the Wii U. This was around that time where Nintendo was like, wait a sec, people are actually interested, we need to start making more of these, and they could not make them fast enough. Because all of a sudden, everybody was like, Nintendo is back, and we are ready to give them all our money. There was no need to manufacture hype, there was no need to withhold stock and pump more out when a different game is coming out, because they didn't need to. They're just like, you're gonna want to play this Zelda game, you're gonna want to play this Mario Kart game, and down the line we have Mario Odyssey. Not to mention the fact that the whole concept of the Switch was still revolutionary. People's heads were turning. The Switch 2 is boring. It's uninteresting. And I can already read the comments that I'm going to be seeing right now. So you're telling me that it's still outselling the Switch 1, which was the best-selling Nintendo console? Yes, I am. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna start steering into that. I want you just to get more and more confident and more happier about this, because I think it'll be that much funnier if the Switch 2 fails. Because if it doesn't fail, I mean, worst case scenario, nobody going up against a corporation was expecting to win. Me and many people that are listening to this right now, most of you actually that are listening to this right now, we didn't put a penny towards this thing. So worst case scenario, we just sat out for something that we don't want to buy. But there are a lot of people right now that have invested a lot of money into something that is collecting dust, invested a lot of money into something, and they're wondering why there aren't more games being pushed towards it. A lot of people that invested a lot of money to just play their last gen games over and over again, and maybe they're happy about that. I bought a Wii U and a 3DS, both when they were still in their early infancy and they weren't making sales, and I had a lot of fun with those. But I think I was the exception. I don't think I was the norm. And likewise, that's why you're hearing so much about people that are buying and regretting their purchase of the Nintendo Switch 2. That's why you're hearing so much about people that decided to return their consoles now, because they were promised a premium experience. They were promised a modern gen, high, expensive experience. And instead, they got the Nintendo budget experience at the PlayStation price. As of yesterday, the Switch 2 basically no longer has a lead over the two PlayStation consoles that are basically tied with it, the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. And then today we find out that the Switch 2 has had its worst performing week by a long shot. And keep in mind, this isn't absurd. 4 out of the 5 worst performing weeks since the Switch 2 launch has been in the past 4 weeks. With the 5th worst performing week coming on that 1 week where they withheld stock prior to Bonanza coming out in order to inflate the numbers and make it seem like everybody was excited to go to the stores and buy Bonanza. So it's not like last week was the best performing week, or second best performing week, or third best performing week. It's just working its way downwards at this point, and the jump from last week to this week is so high, it's basically a cliff. The only thing we are left to do is to speculate whether it's a stock issue or it's a hype issue. I know what I think. You all know what I think. If you didn't get a chance to see my video from yesterday, go ahead and watch that one. The headlines might be feeding you something, but reality says otherwise. Alright, I gotta go back to work. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys on the next one.